Okay, it's 3 o'clock. We're going to call the State Government Committee to order. Ms. Hammonds, please call the roll.
Representative Sells.
Here.
Representative Bedsole. Dr. Boyd. Representative Butler. Representative Chestnut.
Here.
Representative Keel. Representative Kirkland. Representative Lands. Representative Lawrence. Representative Paramore. Representative Shaw.
Here.
Representative Stodhagen. Representative Wood.
Here.
Representative Yarborough. We have a quorum.
Okay, we have a quorum. We're in position to conduct business. At this time, we'll call up SB 230, Senator Albritton. Welcome to the best committee in the House, Senator.
Indeed it is, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me. SB 230, thank you for bringing this up. This is our geologic storage. This is the means whereby we can capture CO2 in an environmentally safe way, and then we can take it and store it. And we can store it within the cavities within the earth that's already in existence. It is a means so that we can use that cavity that's owned by the surface owners and put it and keep it there until needed or whatever. That will allow means for us to comply with regulations, keep power plants open and such so they can capture that and store it without endangerment. Now, this is the same bill that Representative Baker passed in this body a few weeks ago, I guess.
Yes, sir.
And I hope to plan to have it on the Senate floor tomorrow to pass it also. So it's the exact same bill. Entertain any questions.
Yeah, okay, we have any questions or any comments?
At the correct time, I'd like to move your bill favorable.
Okay, any questions? Ms. Boyd?
One area I'm not familiar with, but I believe in learning
Yes,
something
ma'am.
new every day. Just
Well,
refresh.
Ms. Boyd, if you don't know much about this, you just hang on till we get to in a few minutes, but go ahead.
I just know this on the physical note, but I thought in your explanation you had said this is already, is this adding to, or is this a new space? And I looked at the physical note, and it was not an undetermined amount or not certain. I just want a little clarity on the funding of it and the real purpose for storing. I think you said that. I just couldn't hear it well.
First off, there is no cost to the state. This is all private industry handled, all right? And this is a means so that CO2 that is in a combustion matter, byproduct, is recaptured, taken, condensed into a liquid. Then it is transported and it is stored into cavities that are already existent underground. In those areas where oil and gas have been removed or just naturally occurring. And then that liquid CO2 is pumped into those areas and held under pressure in liquefied form. It will be regulated by the state oil and gas board as they do with oil and gas wells and other things for leakage or any other issues. So we have safety concerns there. There's no cost to the state. And it allows us to take and comply with federal regulations so that we can store it safely.
Thank you.
And Ms. Boyd, it might be helpful to know that this is already, it was helpful to me to know that there's already 4 or 5 states that's doing this.
That's correct.
That's right. Any more questions, any more comments? Okay, we have a motion for a favorable report. Do we have a second? Second by Representative Kirkland. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, yes, sir, your bill passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, next up is SB 296. Is there anyone here to carry that bill? Okay, we will hold that bill. Next up is HB 485, Representative Cal.
Thank you, Chairman Sales. So HB 485 allows the state auditor's office to investigate missing items. They're, of course, responsible for counting missing items, but allows them to conduct investigations as to where that state property might be located. And if they find that it's missing or stolen, they can demand repayment. If the responsible party does not pay, then they can turn it over to the Attorney General's office. And the Department of Examiners of Public Accounts have signed off. AG's attorneys have signed off. Department of Finance is okay with it also.
And I'd like to say I've signed off on it too. I spent some time talking to the state auditor about this piece of legislation. So,
I
do we have any?
appreciate your time there too.
Yes, sir. Do we have any questions? Or any comments?
I have a question.
Representative Lance.
I just was curious, what is the process now and how does this differ?
Well, I guess if they really don't have investigative powers right now. All they really do is count it, and if it's missing, it's missing. So, for instance, they had a situation that they found out about where a state agency pulled up to the surplus property division to drop off equipment. There was an hour-long wait to get in. The guy just pushed it off in the yard and left it. It's $20,000 worth of equipment, and there's no real way of recovering that money from the employee or doing an investigation to find out who did it. And so that's what they're trying to create now is a method of getting that money back if somebody's found to be negligent.
Okay, so I guess I'm understanding there must have been numerous situations then that have led to the need to create something like this.
There are, I think, and they even when they went and counted one agency, they had lost a large amount of. Well, it wasn't necessarily lost; it was missing. I don't know how it became missing, but a large amount, and they didn't have a good internal policy on how to track what they had, and the auditor could provide that also. So it's not only after the loss happens, but it could be preventative in a way where they make sure that it's properly accounted for beforehand.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, we have a motion by Representative Yarborough. I'm sorry, second by Bedso. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any-
Abstain?
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. Okay, next up is we're going to have a public hearing, which really is informative type hearing because this is the last meeting of the year. So at this time, we're going to start a public hearing on, and we're going to start it off with Representative Shaw.
Okay.
You would like to explain what?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, a lot of people, if you know my background, I'm a technology guy. Spent the last 30 years in technology by day before I started this other job. And one topic that's in the news for the last 10 or so years is Bitcoin, was what most people know. But there's actually a bigger concept called blockchain technology. You hear more and more about it because the world's becoming more and more interested in it, and now there's a lot of money involved as these digital assets kind of become a centerpiece of traditional finance. But there's also a lot of opportunity with blockchain technology. There's things like smart contracts. There's ways of you can even store land titles and things like that. There's lots of directions they can go. So I'm not going to get into a big technical discussion today. This is more about what it means for our state and what it can mean for our state. Around the world, really, and around the nation, kind of the rules around blockchain and Bitcoin and similar technologies are kind of growing organically. And that's okay in some places, and in other places, I think we're, in my opinion, trying to apply some older laws and regulations to a brand new technology. And I want, personally, and I think I would hope the legislature would agree eventually, that it'd be a better idea for us to have a legislative approach to this. The people should speak on how they want this technology to be used in the state. So legislative intent, I think, is important. I mean, what do we want this technology to do in our state? Also, regulatory certainty. If we want businesses, if we want people to come and invest in our state and take part in these technologies, having some regulatory certainty is very important. So this bill was really a starting point in the conversation. We introduced it and had a lot of input from a lot of people, and obviously y'all should have received a substantial sub in the process based on, in fact, I got more input today from the trial lawyers had some interest, and I've tried to incorporate as much of that as possible in the sub. I think in the off season we'll be talking a lot more about it and working on some more details, because obviously it's a complicated concept and it's really important that the public has input, that the various stakeholders have input, but also it's important that the legislators and both state, Senate and House understand, what this can mean for the state and what the technology can do for us. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right. So what we're doing, as a committee, a lot of us do not even understand what mining crypto means, right? So this is opportunity for them to try to explain that to us, and we can ask questions. And at this point, we will start our public hearing. Ms. Hammonds, please call the first speaker.
Eric Peterson.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're going to start you off with 5 minutes, but we'll have some questions for you after that.
Sure. My name is Eric Peterson. I am the policy director of Satoshi Action Fund. We are a nonprofit educational organization to teach about digital assets such as Bitcoin. So why are we here today? If you look at estimates, 800,000 people in the state of Alabama own a digital asset of some kind. Yet there, as Representative Shaw pointed out, there are no laws governing its use, how you can hold it, how it's taxed when it's spent. So these are things that we want to get into Alabama code for those 800,000 people to know what they can do with their digital assets and the businesses around digital assets, how they can operate in the state. So this bill really does three things. Number one, it creates definitions for new technology. When you do things like rideshare or the internet was coming, the state of Alabama wanted to regulate it and needed to know what it was talking about and have precise terms and definitions. Number two, what can you do with digital currencies such as Bitcoin? This legislation lays out two things you can do. One is you can take it off of an exchange. You might have Cash App or PayPal or Venmo. You can buy Bitcoin on any of those apps, but those are still held by those companies. The real innovation of blockchain technology and digital currency is that you can possess it in the same way that I possess the cash in my own wallet and have control over it at any point in time. So the state of Alabama would say it is okay for you to do that, and we're going to let you do that. Number two, if you're a business, that you can accept it for payment, which of course opens the question, how is that going to be taxed because the price of digital assets can move? All this bill would say is that you owe the same taxes for sales that you owe if it was paid for in US dollars using a credit card, and it cannot be subject to any additional taxes. The other thing we would say is any small transaction under $200 would be exempt for capital gains because the price moves. So if you bought it at, say, $50,000 and now it's at $55,000, if you're just buying a cup of coffee, you're filling up your gas with Bitcoin, then you wouldn't have to report to the state of Alabama that you experienced a capital gain there, adding to the seamless transition of the digital assets into our economy. You've heard a little bit about Bitcoin mining. Let me tell you that this is a misnomer. There's nothing mined, nothing is coming out of the ground. We're not taking Bitcoin out of the ground or putting CO2 into the ground. All these things are data centers. They're data centers that use specialized computers to process Bitcoin transactions for people to send Bitcoin across the world to each other. Now, they use a lot of energy, and they can be loud because these computers can generate a lot of heat. This legislation just says that they have to be regulated like any other data center, or if they're zoned in an industrial area, they have to meet the requirements of that industrial area and cannot be given any additional requirements that don't count for, say, a car manufacturing facility or a steel plant or anything else. This legislation, really the point is to add some basic ground level rules for what the 800,000 people do in Alabama every day. They own it, they trade it, they might mine it, they run these things out of their homes, or they might have a business to do that. We want some rules about that so folks can go forward and move forward in this industry in Alabama. This legislation is on its way to the governor's desk in Oklahoma. It passed the Louisiana House 103-0. I'm hoping we can get it to the governor's desk there soon, and it was spent out of the House and Senate in Missouri. So it's the time for Alabama to address this issue, and I'll be happy to take any questions of the committee chairman. I don't know if that's now or after the proponents or opponents speak. You tell me.
Sure, we can entertain questions now if we have any. Okay, I have a few. So the mining crypto, can you explain how that works in your data center? How does that work?
Yeah. Um,
So the mining the crypto,
mhm.
where's that definition? Are you raising revenue? Where's the revenue coming from?
Yeah, this is a great question. So we use email every day, right? We're all used to sending messages back and forth to each other, and there's an underlying protocol or just computer code that allows you to send a message from one address to another address. Bitcoin works much in the same way. There's an underlying computer code that allows people to send Bitcoin from one address to another address. But the question is, who who does that right now. So for email, we have very large companies that do it. We have Gmail, Hotmail, whatever web service you use, and they sell ad space. That's how they make money. For Bitcoin, if you process Bitcoin transactions, which happen about every 10 minutes, so you might think of a way as when you send an email, rather than going out immediately, they all get batched together and go out in 10-minute intervals. The folks that process those transactions and send those transactions out are rewarded with newly created Bitcoin. Currently, that is 3 Bitcoin, worth approximately $55,000, so $150,000. And so the folks that process those transactions can be very lucrative. They often have these businesses in rural areas that have access to substations that have excess power. They reach agreement with power companies where they can be shut off during periods of high demand uh, in return for a lower rate. And they tend to create, about a dozen or so jobs at these facilities. And based on the tax rate, they tend to pay a few $100,000 to up to a few $1 million in taxes, depending at the size of the facility. But if you go one of these, I apologize, I didn't bring my hand out. They're just racks of computers. They look very similar to any data center you have ever seen. They just tend to be a little smaller, and rather than allow you to watch Netflix or send email, they process Bitcoin transactions. They just do that one thing.
So you said next to a substation. So are they brick and mortar? Are they portable, or what are they?
Most of these things are brick and mortar. When we this legislation lays out a definition for a Bitcoin or a digital asset mining business at over 1 megawatt of power. Over 1 megawatt of power is quite a bit of power. So you're generally going to be next to a substation or something that can give you that level of power. And so they're going to be pretty much look like a warehouse of some kind. They can be brick and mortar. They can be put up with metal. But generally, the goal for these things is be able to get the wiring so that's safe. Find some way to cool them because all this energy produces a lot of heat, and find some way to dampen the sound depending on how they're cooled. Either they're cooled with fans, or they can be in a special liquid where they actually don't create any noise at all. But the facilities are created to house those computers and keep them cool. And generally, the more energy you have access to, the more computers you can put up, the more profitable you're going to be.
So you just run these computers and they make money for you.
That's pretty much it. Yes, at a very high level, they do one thing. They do one thing only. As long as you keep them in power and you keep them repaired, they process transactions and return Bitcoin.
So as they return to Bitcoin, is that a commission, or is that a commission, or is that a fee for your processing, or how's that described?
Yeah, so it happens in one of two ways. One, the protocol knows who processes the transaction, and it is associated with an address. You might think of it like an email address. If you process those transactions, the code itself will essentially deposit now 3 Bitcoin there. If you are trying to get a Bitcoin transaction processed, you might also pay a small fee. If you've ever sent money overseas, you're very familiar with paying a small fee. Those fees are also collected. And so the folks that process those transactions get some from what you might call the computer code and from some that are paying to have their transactions processed.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'm gonna keep asking
Yep,
questions.
please do.
So in the process, can you describe the process? So where's it coming from, and where's it going to?
When somebody sends it to each other,
Okay, so in the process is the money changing hands?
yes.
Well, it's not money, so it's whatever,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, I'm sure the folks in this committee are very familiar with PayPal or Venmo or something like that. The transaction interface looks very similar to that. What you would do is you would open an app, you would put in the address of where you want to send it to. It's going to look like numbers and characters, and you'll hit send, decide how much Bitcoin you want to send to that person, and in a few minutes, that Bitcoin will be routed by one of the miners to that address, and then that person will then possess the Bitcoin, of which they are able to do with it whatever they want. Again, it's a money or a money like substitute, so they can use it to buy something or send to somebody else.
So unlike PayPal, there's not a fee for transferring the money. You just get paid by the company. And so if I transfer you some Bitcoin, am I paying the miner a fee?
Yes, that is exactly correct. There's a small fee paid by the person sending it, and then that tends to be much smaller than what is paid for by the computer code, for lack of a better term. So um, right now, let's again, a miner might get rewarded for 3 by the computer code for processing that transaction, and they might make another half Bitcoin by uh, transacting 1,000 transactions, something like that. Would be a typical payment for somebody who processes a batch of transactions.
So who owns these centers? Is this some one company owning all of it, or is this opportunity for people to get in this business? Or
Yeah, it's a great question. So, America has really become a leader in this industry for a variety of reasons. Number one, we're an energy superpower. This is no shock to anybody. We do wind, we do solar, we do natural gas, we do coal, we do nuclear. It tends to be concentrated in energy-rich states. So Texas has about half of all the Bitcoin miners. These are from a variety of companies, a variety of players. You've had people who are in traditional oil and gas have started doing this. If you look to our neighbors in Georgia, there's a company called CleanSpark. They do a lot of their work off of nuclear. They just bought some facilities in Mississippi. I know folks up in Nebraska who go off of wind power. These tend to be American energy entrepreneurs that find energy because the cheaper the energy, the more profitable the business. So they find energy that is not being used and utilized, can get it at a good price, and generally build out America's energy mix. And that tends to be the business model.
okay, so we kind of understand the process, but we probably still don't understand the money changing hands. Okay, Representative Yarborough.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. Can you describe the process of how people go about converting Bitcoin to cash?
Sure.
And then also with their own data centers, typically when you do internet transactions and so forth, you've got your HTTPS protocol. So does the data centers and the protocol that's established for doing Bitcoin transactions, do they have their own layers of safety protocols for protecting transactions? And would this legislation help with that and help bring, I guess, uniformity to that, or how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So there's a variety of ways to use Bitcoin, one of which you highlighted, which is to just turn it into American dollars. There's a variety of companies across the United States and the world that will do this. Gemini, Kraken, Coinbase, Block. If you've ever gone to a farmer's market and you've slid your credit card, that's by a company named Block. You can go onto Cash App, which they own, and you can buy Bitcoin. If you transfer your Bitcoin to one of those services, you can then turn it into dollars, or because people do this around the world, people in other countries often take Bitcoin and turn it into some other currency to use. Again, you can also pay for it. There's a variety of companies that make it very easy, where you can essentially scan a QR code and pay for things, even down to a few cents at your local farmer's market. To your question about the code and security, that's the real magic of Bitcoin. And we've talked about these miners or data centers. These data centers are across the world. They run in, I would say probably over 100 countries. They can be very large, like we see in the United States, or they can be folks that just have a very small machine in their home, in their basement, using some extra power. All of these things are trying to do the exact same thing. And the only way the network will ever go down is if somebody owns enough computing power to overpower more than half of the folks running it. And so the more folks that are doing this, the more decentralized it is across the world or across companies, will keep the protocol safer to ensure that people can still access their Bitcoin. They can trust where their Bitcoin is, and they trust they can send their Bitcoin to anyone at any time. And that is really why you see the valuation of this protocol and this technology, is because people trust that decentralized nature. Again, we have the pleasure of living in the United States. We have great financial institutions there are many people across the world that do not have access to these financial institutions. They lack of financial institutions that they can trust. But because they know so many people are doing the same thing and are economically incentivized to do it, they feel that they can trust this money. And the United States is just a great place to do that. And we're very lucky that I like to say that I like to mine Bitcoin in the United States, and I like to export it to the rest of the world to provide them a type of sound money that they might not have access to because they don't have access to our U.S. dollars.
Sure, one more. Yes, sir.
So part of what I think excites me about this is I personally think that the last few years we've seen people be deplatformed.
Mhm.
It's happened financially. It's happened on the World Wide Web. I personally know a gentleman that runs a company that's got data centers scattered throughout even old World War II bunkers and so forth. You know, that the freedom of information,
Yeah.
right? And so also freedom of economics, because I might disagree with a fellow colleague on some policy, but I don't wish them to have their bank account shut down,
Mhm.
right? And so, could you speak for a minute to the possibilities not just of economic freedom for our country, but how this maybe could impact, from what I'm understanding, even economic freedom in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked to people. One of the benefits of my job is to talk to so many people that share so many incredible stories about what this technology has done for them. I was speaking recently to a young man from Myanmar who had criticized the government. If you know anything what's going on over there, it's a very repressive regime. He's now at Georgetown. Um, you can imagine that when he left that country, it was impossible for him to carry out anything of value, right? Physically, right? All his money, he couldn't take that money across the border. He didn't have access to a bank because the government knew who he was. He couldn't transfer it to some account. But here's what he could do: he could hold Bitcoin. And when he left Myanmar to the United States, he kept his entire net worth in Bitcoin. And because of the security we talked about, nobody could take that away from him. And he was able to have a better life in the United States. And so, I could tell you dozens of stories that I've heard from folks across the world who have been in similar situations. And so, all this legislation is trying to do is say, like, you have a right to hold and accept this alternative, this digital currency as a method of payment. We want some rules about that. That is how people do that. But I think it's a real sign to folks that we understand what this technology is. We understand the values that you put in this technology, and we want to make sure that we have some safeguards in place so you can continue to use this technology. And that's really all this bill is trying to get at today.
Okay, I have one last question. So, with all the money that we send across this country through PayPal and banks and everything, how come we have no centers like this for them?
Yeah. So
Why do we need this big processing center with all these computers and all this energy for this?
Yeah. So the real difference is because if you have PayPal or Bank of America or any other financial institution, they're going to go through a traditional data center, which does use significant amounts of energy, though not nearly as energy dense. And the reason is because it's centralized. And so the real difference between your PayPal and your Bitcoin is your PayPal is centralized. It uses traditional financial institutions. And so there's nobody competing to make that transaction. On the Bitcoin side, there are a lot of folks who are financially incentivized to process those transactions. So the more energy they use, the more computers they have, the higher their probability of processing that transaction. But that comes with the benefit, as I was describing to Representative Yarborough, the more people who are trying to process that transaction, that means that it's way more difficult for anybody to stop a transaction because if there was only, let's say, 10 people trying to process transactions, those 10 people could get together and say, we don't like Representative Shaw for this crazy Bitcoin bill that he's trying to bring about, and we're going to stop that
That's right.
transaction. Uh, but because there are people all over the world who are incentivized to process that transaction, that censorship is essentially impossible on that network. Versus with PayPal, there is one point of failure where somebody could go and stop that transaction.
If I could add, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
Bitcoin takes a lot of energy, but not all coins and blockchain takes that. There are different protocols. Bitcoin, it happens to take a lot of power. There are others that don't take nearly as much.
So you throw the transaction out there to the market,
Mhm.
and these data centers try to pick it up.
That's right.
How do you decide which one? So you have time to, so it's like an auction. You say, well, I want this one because it's cheaper, or
That's right. It's sort of thrown out to the market. There'll be a group of transactions that are blocked together, and folks are trying to process that. And the way that you get to process that is essentially, you might think of it as a very long, complicated password, and the first person to guess the password gets to process that transaction. And so all of these computers are just trying to guess that password, and the more computers you have trying to guess the password, the larger the opportunity to do so.
okay. Okay, that sounds good. Thank you for the information.
Thank you.
Okay, please call the next speaker.
Director Amanda Sen.
Thank you, Mr.
Welcome.
Chairman and committee members for your time. I am serving as the director of the Securities Commission, where I've been employed for nearly 16 years. Over 10 years, we've spent investigating cryptocurrency-related cases, and while I don't have the time this afternoon, excuse me, it's been a long day, to summarize all of the myriad fraudulent schemes and business structures and things that have come out of this industry, I can tell you that this is an industry that demands some oversight. What we look at from a securities standpoint is anything with a view toward an investment. Crypto mining, and I haven't seen the sub, I don't know, so I'm just going to share with y'all what I know and what we have been in a position to witness. Staking is an activity that is conducted with a view toward an investment. Last year, the state of Alabama, along with 11 other red states, brought an action against a company, Coinbase. And we said, hey guys, you are operating identical to a securities brokerage firm. Some of your functions are like that of a bank or a credit union or a depository institution, all which are heavily regulated. They have cybersecurity requirements. They have anti-money laundering requirements. They need to tell us who their management team is, where they're located, provide their financials. You guys are conducting these operations just like our legit financial institutions in the state, and you need a license as well. Because we're business friendly, and I love our business institutions, that's why I'm here. Our financial institutions, they do, they pay the cost of doing business. We did not shut them down. We allowed them to continue operations, but we asked them to show cause why they shouldn't get a license. So we're litigating with them. So we're 11 other states and the SEC. Well, in March, the SEC, a case was filed in the Southern District of New York, and Coinbase filed to dismiss it, and the judge said, no, we're not dismissing it. We believe that this activity, staking, is like a security, and we think that you guys are operating like a securities exchange. So there's a lot of litigation around staking. I won't get into that. I'm happy to meet with you guys individually at your convenience. But I know staking is included in the bill. The crypto mining, just to be clear, the Securities Commission is not anti whatever you want to do in your home. Y'all going to sit and mine on your computers? Fine. You want to transact crypto from wallet to wallet? Our concern is with the businesses that are taking and holding funds. They're paying interest. They're extending loans. They're operating like our legit financial institutions, and they're not paying the cost of doing business. There's no oversight. Our other major concern, obviously, is investor protection. I can't tell you guys how many fraudulent schemes we see a week in crypto in the industry. And I'm not anti-crypto. Over 10 years ago, anyway, I've had crypto. I wanted to see what it was about. Now, really, most individuals aren't mining. I understand, Representative Shaw, you have, so you do have a good understanding of it. But you are required to have a business to sort of do that because it's so expensive. Most people get in with the U.S. dollar in, dollar out. And there's not a monopoly on the U.S. dollar. We can compete with the U.S. dollar if we'd like to through digital assets, but the institutions that are forming around cryptocurrency are our biggest concern in investor protections. I did bring for you guys, pass these out, a diagram. And blockchain technology is not synonymous with cryptocurrency. We study blockchain as well. As a matter of fact, I announced 2 weeks ago a financial innovation division. Our office works with industry to help provide artificial intelligence, things that could be useful to our industry, while also balancing the consumer and investor protections. firms, financial firms have to comply, as you well know, with, like cybersecurity requirements. They have to ensure that the vendors that they're doing business with are making sure that our customer funds are protected, at least not if but when, but they are pretty heavily regulated on the cyber side. There are multiple crypto hacks. Once the crypto assets are pulled out, it's nearly impossible to get back. In 2011, Mt. Gox was a big crypto exchange, and that's when we began getting involved, really around 2010, 11. They were hacked, and now billions of dollars worth of crypto were stolen. And so these things, somebody's got to be looking at it. But just by way of example, I have a diagram of a crypto tracing. So you guys know this took 16 hours to put together. I do have one of our agents that specializes in crypto assets. Here, he traced this, and he did remind me, I know you mentioned Myanmar. He said that's the hub for pig butchering, which is one of the frauds that we get calls about weekly. That's a romance scam type case, and they're operating enterprises, criminal enterprises.
Do you have some of those to pass out? Okay, here, he'll take care of that for you.
And I know there is fraud in every industry, and like I said, I'm not here to say anti-crypto, but just several years ago, these companies started popping up. The first three were Ponzi schemes. FTX was one of the bigger ones that you guys saw on the news. Banks were attacked heavily. The banking regulators were last year because they didn't have controls in place to prevent certain things. Their bond holdings. One bank in the Northeast had accepted cryptocurrency as collateral. They were attacked. There's no FDIC. And just yesterday, I read that one of our state banks, River Bank and Trust, got hit with not complying by the FDIC. They got hit by the FDIC. I know our superintendent's here for not having adequate anti-money laundering protocols in place, and they're going to pay a big fine. These cryptocurrency companies don't either, because we know which transactions are flagged as fraudulent and which ones these companies are allowing to go on to investors and consumers. I could talk about this much longer. I know my time's probably up.
So I have a question. I don't know if you can answer that, or maybe, sir, you can answer it. So we know our value of our dollar goes up and down very, very, very minute amount. Okay, and I've owned crypto too, and let me tell you, it was volatile. So if you mine this crypto and you have a crypto wallet, is it subject to what the crypto market is doing? Is it as volatile as what's happening on the market with crypto?
This time last year, I spoke to the credit unions at their advocacy day, and I had a slide, and it said Bitcoin was $22,000. This was in April. This year, I replaced my slide, and Bitcoin was like $79,000.
So that's my question. So if you have this money in your wallet, in your whatever, and you go to the bank to buy something, and you maybe you, or not the bank, but a store like you're talking about, and you have a transaction through the bank, Bitcoin or the currency. By the time you get to the bank with it, it might already have dropped. Is that possible?
Absolutely, it is. And y'all want to see that happen overnight? Google the NFT industry 2 summers ago, when the price of non-fungible tokens, which is also associated with the blockchain, which is a cool technology. I'm not saying it's not. Dropped 92%.
So I guess you don't take it to the bank. I guess you had to cash it in some other way. But anyway, that's right.
Yeah, and it's $1 in, $1 out. And I've talked with our bankers, our depository institution folks, and of course they're concerned. They say crypto. They're paying these just several years ago. Then we started cracking down on some of these companies because they turned out to be Ponzi schemes. But they're paying interest rates that we can't afford to pay. So people are shifting money into the crypto companies and away from our banks. And, I don't know what will ultimately happen with crypto. To me personally, this is personally on the record, it's like, going to a casino. Let's regulate it as gaming then. Get a license to be a casino. If not, they should play by the same rules as our financial institutions. Play by, just get a license. This bill, the earlier version, I don't know if you guys have exempted, I'm not sure what the sub contains, but it did exempt the staking from securities oversight. And money transmission. We also enforce the money transmission law. So PayPal, Cash App, Venmo are all licensed with us. And and several crypto companies are as well for their money transmission activities. That just gives us the authority for calls if something comes up, and we get calls all the time, some kind of fraud's being perpetrated. I know it's in every industry, but we can go in and look at them and say, hey, look, what did you do to prevent this transaction? Because there's a ton of money laundering happening, and they should have the same protocols in place as our banks, credit unions, securities firms, broker-dealer agents, investment advisors. So yeah,
Okay.
said I brought some other articles. I know Mr. Peterson did represent that this bill is moved in several states. Like I said, they're in red states, some of the red states that happen to issue orders against Coinbase. And I don't believe that the versions of the bill that have moved are identical to what was originally filed in this state. I'm on a group text with the other securities commissioners, but there is an article. Arkansas passed the crypto mining bill that Satoshi Group put together, and this is one of 6 where Arkansas said, and I didn't bring, you want to copy it? Yeah, I have some notes on the back, but they're fine. Just my notes. I'm
I'll
shooting
tell
from
you
the
what,
hip today, y'all.
hand it back to him. Let's just tell what just tell us what it is.
Yeah, it's just a New York Times article that kind of summarizes
real quick.
the problems that they've had in Arkansas with the mining. And data centers are great, whatever y'all want to do. I just want us in Alabama to be aware of the issues that came up in Arkansas with the crypto miners.
Okay, tell us where we can find that article if we want to look.
I will hand deliver them to
Okay.
every member.
Okay, great.
Because
Thank
I know how many of y'all may have New York Times accounts, but I'll
Okay,
I'll
thank
hand
you.
deliver those.
Okay, do we have any? Yes, sir.
How you doing today?
Doing well. How are you,
Good.
sir?
You might have already asked this. I probably was asleep.
Wake up.
What is this?
Right. What is that? It's 16 hours of tracing.
Wow.
So the beauty of the blockchain, it is a
So
public
when did
ledger.
Where did it start? Like,
Right. It's so. I just have just another minute. So the blockchain does allow you to view all public transactions. You can see wallet addresses. The problem is for us in law enforcement, like I said, we've been looking at this case for over 10 years. There's nothing behind it. Banks have know your customer requirements. They're either aliases. Of course, we see all the fraud, or you just can't identify who that person is. The only way that we've been able to trace out some of that, and that is an incomplete tracing we had to give up after some time, is if the money, it started at there's one of them's from a Bitcoin ATM, and those are popping up. So people take dollars and put into Bitcoin ATMs and enter a wallet address, and then from time to time they will go through an exchange. And it's only when it goes through an exchange that we can maybe identify some wallet addresses and continue to trace it out, because it instantly gets commingled with other cryptocurrencies and sent out. So sometimes they're sent to an unhosted wallet, and it may sit there for some time until it's moved out. But ultimately, to get, it doesn't have intrinsic value, cryptocurrency, people pull it out in cash. And if it goes to an exchange and it's pulled out in cash, then we can have a trace to another wallet, or ultimately maybe a bank account. But they wind up in overseas exchanges most of the time from our perspective and what we see. We only see the fraud now. I know there's legitimate stuff too. And once it's over there, it's gone. A lot of what we see goes to Southeast Asia, China, Russia. I know, Hamas is using cryptocurrency to fund terrorism. There's all kind of illicit activity. Of course, there is with a lot of different things. But so that's what that is. And I brought our agent too, who did that 16-hour paint.
We have another question.
Thank you, ma'am.
Representative Betzel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was really hoping you would ask, was it supposed to be held this way or that way?
It's a psychological diagram
I
here.
couldn't tell.
What do you see in this?
So
Definitely it's not traceable, looks like.
My honest, serious question is, if you had like a wish list and you could say that the bill would provide all the regulation and oversight to provide for the enforcement, everything just like a traditional financial institution. Today, as you operate, do you have the time, resources, and money to make that happen?
We've been doing that. I mean, we have been bringing these companies in and say, hey, look, y'all need to get licensed or we're going to shut you down, because it is our opinion. And I've worked with members of Congress. Congressman Palmer's office called yesterday. I'm planning to meet with him again. And I've met with Senator Tuberville about these issues. And I know, after FTX, things slowed down in Washington. They're very circumspect in their approach to this. But like I said, I know you said old laws. Gosh, there have been old laws on the books for a long time. Our Constitution that we're still interpreting is fluid sometimes, but that's an entirely separate argument. But anything with sort of a view toward an investment has been fit into the investment contract.
So your opposition is not that you don't we're not set up for the infrastructure in terms of resources or people to do the enforcement. It's that there's no regulation, even in the bill that he's bringing, that doesn't provide for the regulation of this industry if this is brought in.
Well, the original bill exempted from securities the activity of staking and associated. So yeah, it pulled out what we already have a jurisdiction. We maintain we have jurisdiction over this now. It pulls out. And just to give you guys background, we have met with Mr. Peterson several times. This is before session and into early session to discuss, regulatory clarity for us is like get a license if you guys are performing these functions. But there are some nuances in the staking. And we offered to work through regulations. And then, of course, Representative Shaw got involved, and he's been very helpful. But there are, regulations that we can do on the money transmitter side to help with some of this activity should this legislature feel like there's a lack of clarity. I'll say this, though, there is that litigation that's still out there, and that's sort of, been the hesitation. But yes, Representative Bedsole, we have the resources. We've been doing it for over 10 years. We just want all these financial institutions to get licensed like everybody else.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Yarborough.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, what would you say causes, for lack of a better word, bitflation? In terms of the volatility, because I'm asking because I don't pretend to be an expert on this, but when we think of money traditionally, we think Congress has the power to coin money, and that gold and silver shall be legal payment for all debts, public and private, right? So we think of that kind of a intrinsic value asset, right? So, and then of course when we think of inflation as far as the dollar, we think, well, maybe we shouldn't have printed off so much money or whatever.
Agree.
Right? And so, or maybe we shouldn't have shut down our whole country, but that's a separate conversation as well.
Agree.
So, so what causes, for lack of a better phrase, this bitflation where it's so 22 to 79? And then second of all, do you feel like with some reasonable measure of regulations, we can accomplish as much as we reasonably can, not allowing bad actors, but also promoting what appears to be the beauty of decentralized opportunities for people to be the connecting bridges for transactions while not being deplatformed like we've seen happen, whether it was in Canada or a famous speaker that Chase deplatformed him financially. So, the best of both worlds.
Yeah, well, so I feel like we have this if these companies, and I'm not peer-to-peer, whatever they want to do, as long as not defrauding one of our members of the public, an investor, or consumer. So peer-to-peer, you can do what you want. But when the companies, like I said, start custodying and paying interest, and they should have a license. We need to know who they are. We want to know their management team. Look at their financials, because the first three were Ponzi schemes, like legitimate Ponzi schemes. And so some of these folks were deplatformed because they were operating Ponzi schemes, and they were leveraging assets, and there were conflicts of interest all over. I mean, FTX is probably the largest example. Voyager, Gemini, BlockFi never could get licensed. They didn't have the solvency. We work with the SEC on that case. We work with the CFTC regularly. So I guess there's, what people want to do interpersonally is fine, but the businesses that come up around these transactions, they should get there's oversight that's like this industry just demands it. So nobody's trying to stifle innovation. Blockchain technology can be useful. I know some businesses use it in-house. I don't think it's fast enough now. I just, over 10 years, we've been studying it to replace the electronic transactions that are now part of our payment system. But, maybe at some point they could be instantaneous and a public ledger that's able to be interpreted.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions? Yeah, if you can hold on, I'll let you close out if we can finish these other speakers, if that's okay.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to add this so y'all know, in the Senate, there was a resolution filed to create a study committee, a blockchain study committee. We're part of that. We supported it. I know Senator Albritton was in here. He filed it, but that has been done. And Representative Shaw is on the committee, as well as our superintendent here, and several others. So we support that. I don't know, Google the tulip craze. I mean, everybody, tulip bubble, who knows? The NFTs dropped overnight when Paris Hilton had an ape coin and announced she wanted to be queen of the metaverse, and nobody wanted that. And so they started selling. You know, people get all in the hype, and then they get nervous about things. But you know, we still have FDIC insurance. Our financial institutions still do. Our credit unions and even securities firms have a you know, an account. Well, it's whatever, like baseball cards. I know everybody got mad at Nolan Ryan one year, so the value of his card dropped precipitously. I mean, he was just like loved and then hated for a minute. I've always loved him. Like whatever somebody is willing to pay in Bitcoin over and above what they bought it for on any given day. So people decide, you know, Amanda Sin hates Bitcoin. We're all going to pull out whatever. Nobody would ever do anything in response to what I say. But so could there be like a frenzy overnight? Sure.
Okay.
But I'm with you on the inflation of the dollars.
Do we have any other questions? Okay. Thank you for your comments and answers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Please call the next speaker.
Superintendent Mike Hill.
Mike, I'm sorry. You have 1 minute.
You know what?
We might give you 2.
Listen, I will be quick, but you know, I just wanted to say in the beginning that Dr. Boyd sitting back there, and you know, when I was in the legislature, Dr. Boyd had something that the speaker always told her she had to do, and that's to keep Randy Wood and Mike Hill under control. And she had a hard time with that, and now she's got another Shelby County man sitting right next to her. God bless you, Ms. Boyd. She's a good friend. Thank all of you for letting me be here today. And I just want to follow up with what she said. I guess my problem with the whole cryptocurrency industry is they spend all their time and money trying to make sure they're not regulated. It happens in Congress. This bill in some forms happens, is trying to say we don't want to be regulated. We don't want any government to look at us. We don't want anybody to tell us how to do business or what we need to do. Well, let me tell you what happened in the banking industry. In 9/11, all of a sudden, the federal agencies that go after criminals found out that this money had been coming into the United States through wire transfers through banks and going into accounts to fund those people that were trying to destroy America. And so they came up with a lot of rules and regulations and laws in Congress that basically said, okay, banks, from now on, you've got to know who your customer is. When we go into a bank to examine them, the first thing we look at is, okay, let me see your new accounts. And we look to see if they had a driver's license. Was it valid? We look to see if they have a job in the United States. Do we look to see if they're a citizen of the United States? We look to see if their credit report is pretty good. And we want to know that they know who it is. And if they're an LLC, we want to know that the bank knows who those principals are of the LLC. And that's to protect the United States. That's not to make it hard on banks, and it's not to uncover anything. We don't go tell anybody who has an account there and who it was, but because we're not allowed by law to do that. But this industry has no regulation, has no actual assets backing up the funds that are flying through the air. And I know people love blockchain and cryptocurrency, but you know, we got money coming out of the United States that's going to Iraq and Iran and going to Cayman Islands from people that don't want to pay taxes, and they're shipping their money out of. And it's not everybody. There are a lot of really good people that are using the blockchain, but if we got some kind of federal and state regulation, you know, we could make sure that that's not happening. There are ways to do it. There are examiners that can go in and look and understand what needs to be, you know, they need to know who their customers are. They need to know who they're sending the money to. They need to know who in this LLC that just sent $200 million to Saudi Arabia. Who are they? What are their backgrounds? And banks are required to do that. Savings and loans are required to do that. It's just it's just important to me that at some point the government, this country, needs to decide that it's time to regulate an industry We can't do much of it in the state. I'll be honest with you. There's not much we can do in the state to regulate, except taking them to court, and that's a hard way to do it. But at some point, Congress has got to take the time to say, okay, enough is enough. We got enough fraud. We got enough losses. We got, I can't tell you how many complaints we get through the banking industry. Say, ma'am, we don't regulate cryptocurrency, but you can call Amanda Sen. I put it off on her. But that's all I want to say, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions, any comments? Okay, seeing none, sir. Thank you very much. Good to see you back here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, there's one other sheriff.
Okay, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. I just told him not to come in the interest of time.
You're right. We have him
Okay.
right here.
You can take him off.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, this time we'll go back to Representative Shaw for closing statements. Yes, sir. You're welcome. Ms. Boyd, I promised you there's going to be something on here confusing. We're all confused. Yes, ma'am. We all have to learn something new. That's right. Okay, if there's any other questions or comments. Okay, this meeting's going to be adjourned. I'm going to ask the committee to hang around just a minute, if you would. I just want to talk to them just a minute, unofficial. You could go ahead and do that. Okay.
I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to just thank Representative Shaw for bringing your expertise to this and helping those of us who don't really know our way through it. So I appreciate that very much. I appreciate everyone.
Okay, I just want to say to y'all that I just want to say to the committee,